Hello and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn about grading policies and homework policies. I'm Dane Roberts, the Executive Director, and I'm glad that you could join us today. Before we dive into the content, just going to share a little bit of exciting news, which is that Monticello Academy has been nominated and recognized as a finalist for Charter School of the Year. That's both campuses as a district. We are one of two charter schools in the running for this honor, which will be decided in June. So thank you to all of the parents for your contributions. It is a group effort to accomplish the great things that we've done in the last year, so we appreciate it. Let's dive into our topic, grading and homework, how mastery-based grading works, and what's the deal with homework? How does it work at Monticello Academy? There's some questions that have come up recently, and we realized that we could do a better job of communicating how our homework policy and our grading policy works. So let's dive in. First, a question. What does an A mean? If you see a kid come home with an A on the report card, what do you assume that means? We hope, we think that it ought to mean that the student has demonstrated mastery of the standards of the course. But in a traditional grading system, what about things like extra credit? You fail a test. The teacher says, oh, well, you can make up for it by doing some extra credit, do some assignments. Maybe it's directly related, maybe it's not, maybe it's just additional work, and therefore the grade comes up. Does the child now have mastery of the material that was failed on the test? Maybe or maybe not. What about participation grades? It's not uncommon for teachers to say, if you participate in class, make comments, join in discussion, you can get points that will increase your grade. Do those comments reflect mastery? Maybe, maybe not, but we give students points just for participation. Completion grades. Sometimes teachers give students points simply for completing an assignment, not necessarily whether it was a reflection of mastery or not. Different teachers. We have some rigorous teachers who expect really high quality work in order to earn an A. Other teachers may settle for less rigorous work or may give grades out for effort without necessarily that work reaching the bar that we would expect. Think about averaging in a typical traditional grade book. Over the course of a math unit, say, they're practicing some work with fractions. The first attempt, they get a 33%, definitely failing. The second attempt, they get a 69%. Okay, lots of progress there. Third attempt, they're at 85%, and they are doing pretty well. They definitely understand the basics of the concept. In a traditional grade book, those three attempts are averaged for a 62, a D minus. Is a D minus reflective of what the student has learned? Well, no, if we assume that that third attempt demonstrates some level of mastery, then the 62% is old news. It does not represent the current student level, the student's current level of mastery. So all of these factors have led to two things, neither of which we believe are good for kids. One is that grades can be meaningless. Parents and children don't know what they communicate. Do they communicate an actual level of mastery, or do they simply communicate responsibility? It also means that grades are often inflated. Parents often have a false sense of security because they see A's and B's and they assume that means that their children are learning the things that they're supposed to learn. However, for all the reasons that we've gone over, it may not be. The student may actually not have mastery of the math concepts, the reading, the history, whatever the content is. They could have inflated the grade through all these other things that don't reflect mastery. And then the student takes the end of year test and it shows that they actually have not reached the state benchmark for proficiency. And the parents are confused because, hey, my child's come home with straight A's. Why would they not be able to pass the test? If you compound that over years and years, and then they're going to take their ACTs and their SATs, and they're not what the parents expect because they've always been an A or a B student, and yet they don't have scores that would make them competitive for selective college. Well, this is the long-term impact of a grading system that doesn't reflect actual student mastery. So our board-approved grading policy since 2017 has been that students are graded individually based upon mastery of the academic standards outlined in the core knowledge sequence and by the Utah State Board of Education, rather than earning points or being measured by the pace of their learning. Academic course grades are not derived directly from scores on assignments, tests, quizzes, homework, makeup work, or extra credit assignments. Academic course grades may not be based on behavior, timeliness, or other criteria not directly related to competency. What that means is that the way we grade is not a traditional grade book. We can't simply take a bunch of assessments, quizzes, assignments, and just average them together. What we have to do is say, here are what our standards are. We want our students to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and our grade book has to simply reflect, can the students do X, Y, and Z? Homework doesn't count because, for one, we don't know if it reflects students' independent work. When kids bring home homework, it's often considered extra practice. Sometimes they'll get help with it, which is fine in our book, but it doesn't necessarily reflect mastery, so we're not going to count it in the grade book. Same thing, even with tests and quizzes. Although we believe tests can reflect mastery, a test 2 months ago certainly doesn't reflect a student's level of mastery today if they've had ongoing practice and learning. So, what we want grades to do is to communicate clearly. Has the child demonstrated mastery of our core standards? And if not, what is it that they're missing? We measure mastery on a 4-point scale. The highest level is 4, which is actually exceeding mastery. That's the students really going above and beyond what's expected or needed at that grade level. A 3 is green, and that's where their performance reaches the standard as described in the state standards or the Monticello standards. A green is good. Our standards are high. They are college prep standards. So a student who reaches a green, you can be 100% satisfied as a parent. We'd never need to push or put extra pressure, in my opinion, for kids to get blue because blue is actually beyond what the expectations call for. And in some cases, there is no blue. There are some standards where we say it doesn't really make sense to measure anything beyond what mastery is. Mastery is the top score that students can get in some standards. A yellow is nearing mastery. They're close, but not quite there. And then a blue, not yet, or it's sometimes labeled remediation in our grade book, means that there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done for the student to demonstrate mastery. It can also mean that there's no evidence of mastery. Maybe the student understands it very well, but they haven't turned in the assessment. They haven't done the work to show that they've mastered it. So a 0 in the grade book just means no evidence, which shows up as red. So our standards, we've tried to summarize. The state gives us dozens and dozens of standards, sometimes in just one grade level and content area. So we've tried to put them in reasonable buckets that are more understandable for you as a parent. In each course, there should be about 5 to 12 standards or areas of mastery. That's what you can see when you log into masteryconnect.com. Just a little bit about why we like this method of grading. It's supposed to focus us squarely on learning. So it's not just about behaviors. Um, of course, good behavior, paying attention, completing work will help you achieve mastery, but the grades are not a direct reflection of mere behaviors. What they should measure is, did your child learn what they were supposed to learn or not? Not about task completion. It avoids artificial timelines for learning. We know that students learn at different paces, and the first time a student tries something, they might not have mastery, but as they keep learning and reviewing over the course of the year, they're going to gain mastery, and we don't want previous past failures to demonstrate mastery to influence their grade. If they've worked hard and can now do it, then great. That's what their grade should be. Now, there are, for example, learning how to write an essay. Maybe at the beginning of the year, they really couldn't show proficiency at writing an essay, but on their fourth attempt, maybe after a few months, they've got it. They really can write a solid essay. That last demonstration of mastery overrides all the previous attempts because what matters is what they can do now. There are a few exceptions in the gradebook where we actually do average. One example is spelling. Students typically get a spelling list every 1 or 2 weeks, and we can't say that your last spelling test overrides all previous spelling tests because the last spelling test actually is not a measure of their overall mastery. Spelling is something that happens in discrete chunks, and students need to master a large majority of those words in order to have mastery. So there are occasions where we will average, but those are the exceptions, and it's only for certain content where the kids actually have discrete lists of content that they do need to master. We don't penalize students for earlier failed attempts at mastery. We hope that this contributes to a growth mindset and motivation for kids to learn. Hey, if I failed it once, it's okay because I can keep learning and I can try to master it and I can demonstrate mastery later. And ultimately, we hope this gives you as a parent accurate information. When you see a green in the grade book, that means your student actually understands it. It doesn't mean that it's just been inflated through good behavior or through completing work. There are some disadvantages to mastery grading that I want to acknowledge that are important for you to understand as a parent. Because students can demonstrate mastery at any point, almost any point in the year, our teachers can put some cutoffs on. They can't be grading everything in the month of May. So there are going to be some restrictions on when students can demonstrate mastery, but in general, they can take multiple attempts over the course of the year. That can lead to complacency. We've certainly seen it happen where students say, "Oh, well, I don't need to study now," or "I don't need to worry about the test because I can always take it later." And that's a dangerous mindset because many of the concepts, the math, the reading, it does require sustained practice over time. And that is the second point, related to the second point, which is that some learning requires just repetition. It needs reps. You can't, even if you demonstrate it once, that doesn't necessarily mean you have it because you've got to deepen that skill and really firm it up through repeated practice. And that's why we often do nightly reading assignments or additional math problems, is so that we can really make that knowledge stick and be the deeper mastery that we want. So are we a no homework school? That's the question many parents want to know. And the answer is we don't grade homework. So is it possible for a child to do zero homework and still pass all their classes? Absolutely. As long as they demonstrate mastery on the assessments and assignments that we give, they can not touch their homework all year and still do fine academically in the grade book. That doesn't mean we don't assign homework. When we assign homework, however, it should be limited and purposeful. We really understand that kids do a lot of really valuable things outside of the school day. They're involved in often, music lessons and sports, and they do chores and they have time with their family. And these are all things that we value as a school. And so we never want our homework to overwhelm all of the other really good things that students are doing. But with these limited assignments that we do give, we think it can help you as a parent know a little bit about what your child is learning, stay in touch with the expectations, the type of math they're doing, the types of things they should be reading, and areas where your child is doing well or might need a little bit more help. We also think that homework can help your child establish good habits. One concern we've had from some of our students who've gone on to high school is that because we didn't emphasize homework and the completion of homework, they were a little bit unprepared for the rigors and demands of high school, where more homework is often required. So that's one reason we do want to establish habits and still give these homework assignments, because we know many parents still want their children to do it so that they can establish those good habits. It also can help your child get the additional practice they need so that they can show mastery. Um, you know, it really depends, and so they can improve academically. The decision comes down to you as a family. Whether you do it or not, it's your decision as a parent. The accountability for us is for the learning. It's not for completing the homework. We have that standards-based report card. They'll still be taking assessments. We'll still track whether they're mastering the things they need to or not. Um, we also have a policy of not socially promoting children, which means that children do not automatically go on to the next grade level at Monticello Academy. They don't follow their peers just simply because of their age. They are going to the next grade level because they have actually mastered the previous year's material. So that's another form of accountability. It's not one that we hope or want to use because we hope that students are mastering things all along the way. But that is one of the ways that we keep our standards high, is making sure that students master it before they go on to the next grade level. So it really does, in the end, depend on your child. If you have a child who you're not worried about their work habits or their ability to do homework later on in high school, you could take the approach that, hey, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we're not worried about homework. We get other things going on after school, and my child is doing well academically. They're getting all greens and blues, and I'm not worried about whether they're mastering it or not. That's totally acceptable by our lights. That's fine. On the other hand, if your child really does need that extra practice, and many children do, then we wouldn't advise not doing the homework. We think it can be helpful and important for your child to gain that level of mastery. So our guidelines in terms of the homework that we do send home, you can think of it as extra practice. There's a daily reading log in the lower grades that might be specific reading based on the skills that they're learning in class. Up in the upper grades, it might be self-selected reading or maybe a novel that they're reading in class. Limited math practice, a few problems, typically word problems, so that you can see the types of questions they're expected to solve. Um, at Highbury, orchestra, choir, or band, the instructors there absolutely want the kids to do daily practice so that they can improve in their musical craft. And there's occasional assignments in other subjects. Um, I've been reviewing this policy with teachers at both campuses because we've learned that there might have been some teachers assigning things that weren't consistent with this policy. So just to flag it, if you're at West Point in the upper grades, students have been doing a science fair project that has they've been told to the students that it will go into the grade book. The teachers said, you know what, that might not be appropriate based on our policy. And that is true. We are actively discussing what it will look like next year. But for now, the science fair project is going to need to go into the grade book. That's really the only exception that we've approved this year. And next year, it should be nothing at all that's done at home goes into the grade book. So these are the general guidelines. This is the maximum amount of homework our teachers should be assigning. Extra practice they should be assigning in kindergarten, 10 minutes of reading practice, 10 minutes of math. And then it gradually increases to seventh and eighth grade. It's preparing students for AP and honors courses. In that case, they might need to be reading a novel so that they can pass a quiz the next day. Again, they won't be docked on their grade if they didn't turn in a reading log or do that reading at home, but it might affect their grade if they can't pass the assessment based on the reading that they were supposed to do. So the accountability might be there through other methods. However, I think it's worth reinforcing with your children that in many cases, this extra practice is called for and will be really helpful for their grades. So I hope this explanation helped you understand our policies and the reason why we have those policies. So feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, and I'll be happy to answer a question now if anyone has it.